The Buddha did not return to the world like a man who wanted to prove something. He returned like someone who had stopped fighting reality. Step by step, village by village, he moved with the same quiet clarity that had formed beneath the tree. But now the road was turning back toward a place he had once called home. Kapilavastu, the palace, the walls that had once promised safety, the life he had lived without knowing what life truly was. News traveled faster than footsteps. People spoke of him before they saw him, whispering that the prince had vanished only to return as something else. He no longer carried a weapon, a crown, or ambition, yet his presence could still a room. Some exaggerated, some doubted, others feared. But even the skeptics felt curiosity rising, touched by a story that reached deeper than power. A tale of leaving everything behind and somehow becoming more alive. As he approached the outskirts, the air felt familiar, though it offered no comfort. The Buddha did not feel nostalgia. He felt awareness. His body remembered these roads and his eyes recognized the shape of the land. Yet his mind no longer turned memory into identity. He watched the pull of the past arise and he watched it soften. The palace was now simply a place, stripped of its power to be a cage, a promise, or a wound. When he finally entered the city, people gathered at a distance. Their silence had a heartbeat. They watched the robe, the calm, and the way he walked without performing or searching for approval. They looked into his face, trying to recover the old story of the prince they remembered. But they met a man who had suffered, searched, broken, and then stopped breaking. The Buddha felt their attention like wind on the skin, impersonal and purely human. He saw them clearly. Those waiting for a miracle, those expecting a mistake, and those who, without knowing why, simply wanted to be near such stillness. Word reached King Suddhodana quickly. The king had spent years building a world where his son would never need to look outside, replacing truth with comfort and arranging pleasure like a shield. Now truth was walking back toward him, not as rebellion, but as a mirror. The palace prepared itself with more order, more guards, more control. Yet beneath the rituals, a particular fear moved. Not fear of violence, but fear of losing the narrative. If Siddhartha returned changed, then everything the king had protected him from had been real all along. He had not saved his son from suffering. He had only delayed the moment of seeing, and deep down, the king knew it. When the Buddha stepped through the palace gate, he carried neither triumph nor bitterness. He came as he was, quiet, clear, unshakable. The marble, the columns, the scent of incense, they remained, hanging in the air like heavy memories. But the Buddha did not tighten or shrink within those walls. He simply walked, as if the stones were just stones. Guards stood straighter and servants froze, caught between a bow and a stare. His presence did not demand respect. It made people wonder why they had ever felt the need to demand anything at all. The king met him with eyes full of history. For a moment he looked like a father again, but the defenses soon returned. He spoke as a ruler, citing duty, lineage, and the shame of leaving. He spoke of the kingdom as protection and family, as a barrier against time. But the Buddha did not argue. He allowed the words to land and pass, like leaves touching water. When he finally spoke, he did not sound like a preacher, but like a son who had gone to the very edge of life and returned without hatred. He told his father that suffering had never been outside the palace. It had always been inside, hidden under music and silk, hidden under the illusion of permanence. He spoke of how aging, sickness, and death eventually ignore royal blood and bypass the strongest walls. Then he offered a truth the king could feel before he could understand. The mind suffers most when it denies what is true. Denial is endless effort, a quiet war that exhausts everyone who fights it. The king wanted to push back with authority, but authority holds no weight against reality. The Buddha's clarity was undeniable to a man tired of pretending. For a moment the palace went quiet, as if the building itself were listening. The The king looked at his son and something cracked. Not full acceptance, not yet, but a small opening in the armor. The Buddha did not ask for permission or understanding. He offered the Dharma as one offers water, not to impress, not to conquer, only to relieve thirst. This was the first turning point of his return. Not the moment he entered the palace, but the moment he refused to let it become a battlefield. But the palace held more than a king. It held the life he had left behind without explanation. It held Yasodhara and Rahula, and an ache of love that had matured into something deeper. The Buddha knew this meeting would be different because love does not argue with the mind. Love goes straight to the heart. As he walked the familiar corridors, the marble and shadows no longer pulled at him. The palace was no longer a sanctuary. It was a lesson built on denial. Still, he felt the honest weight of consequence. Awakening does not erase the past. It only removes the blindness surrounding it. When he reached the chambers, time slowed. Yasodhara did not run to him. She did not collapse. She stood in a stillness born of years of waiting. Her eyes carried a pain that was strong and a love that refused to bargain. Behind her gaze lay the question that had burned since the night he vanished. Why? The Buddha offered no poetic excuses, no talk of destiny. He met her gaze with full, steady honesty and allowed the reality of his actions to be felt. The loss, the loneliness, the weight she carried while the world praised his renunciation. He did not try to shrink her pain for his own comfort, and he did not reach for the quick relief of forgiveness. He stayed present because compassion is not the removal of pain. It is the willingness to remain inside it without turning away. He spoke gently, revealing that he left not because love had ended, but because love without understanding is helpless against suffering. He had seen that no amount of protection could stop the inevitable. If he had stayed, he would have lived in comfort while truth slowly closed in on his family. He could no longer live within that cost. Yasodhara listened. The silence between them was heavy, yet no longer empty. It was full of a life shared, and a night that had split time in two. Her pain did not vanish, and the Buddha did not try to erase it, because real healing begins by seeing what happened without flinching. For the first time, he let her feel that she was not carrying the truth alone. He was not the prince returning to a role. He was a man who could finally hold truth without fear. Then Rahula appeared, no longer a baby, but a child with eyes that mirrored his father's old innocence and his new clarity. The Buddha watched him with a tenderness that proved the heart still feels even when the mind is awake. Rahula stood there with the simple courage of a child, asking wordless questions about belonging, identity, and what it means to have a father who left and returned to someone else. In that moment, the palace ceased to be history and became the living present. A family stood together, facing the cost of transformation. This was not a clean legend where everything is resolved in one conversation. The Buddha's return did not rewind the night he left, and it did not restore the old world. It offered something more difficult, a way forward, a way to live without being crushed by the weight of existence. And one question remained, a question that would shape the future. Could the Dharma live within the bonds of a home? Could it move through the love of father, mother, and child without becoming attachment again? The Buddha looked at Rahula, and the moment held its breath. Because what happened next would change more than the palace. It would change the future of the Sangha itself.